strength. She had seen his protective ruthlessness, and together they had survived an ordeal that would have broken most others. But now came the real challenge: trust. Adrian had to decide whether to believe her when she revealed her past, when she told him the truth about her connections, her gift, and her intentions. To do so could place them both in peril, yet to ignore it risked losing her forever. The weight of the decision pressed upon him like a vice, and for the first time he felt the vulnerability that came from caring for someone beyond his own family, his own empire. Nia, meanwhile, felt the tension, the unspoken question hanging in the air. She had survived the physical threats, but now the emotional stakes loomed larger. Trust was dangerous, particularly with a man like Adrian, whose world was built on fear and control. Yet she also sensed the possibility, the glimmer of connection that promised something more than survival, perhaps even understanding, acceptance, and a fragile kind of safety. The night around them remained tense, shadows stretching long, rain pattering against the windows, and the city beyond pulsing with unseen threats. Both understood the stakes: survival, trust, and the fragile bond that had formed between them were now intertwined, delicate yet powerful. As they exited the warehouse into the dim, wet streets, the silence was broken by a single, chilling thought. The blackmailer would not relent. The danger was not over. And Adrian, facing the choice of trust or loss, felt the weight of the world settle on his shoulders. To trust her was to risk everything. To doubt her was to risk losing her forever. The night hung heavy, pregnant with tension, uncertainty, and the promise of storms yet to come. Adrian sat in the dim light of his office, the shadows of the room stretching long and jagged across the walls. His fingers drummed against the polished wood of his desk, sharp, controlled, and tense. The rain outside pounded against the windows like a warning, a reminder that the world he ruled was never quiet, never safe. Even in the calm of his private chambers, he could feel the pulse of danger, the stirrings of enemies, and the weight of power that never allowed him a moment's peace. The recent attacks on Nia and the boy gnawed at him, threading his mind with unease and anger. Every corner of his empire was mapped, controlled, monitored. But somehow they had reached her. They had crossed the line, touched something he had vowed to protect, and for that they would pay. His chest tightened as he imagined her in danger, her clever hands and fierce courage rendered useless if they fell into the wrong hands. She had survived against impossible odds, outmaneuvered men trained to kill, and yet, despite her skill, Adrian knew the world she had entered was unforgiving. He had fought countless wars, spilled oceans of blood, and faced betrayals that had left him hardened, unfeeling to most. But something about Nia stirred a raw, unrelenting protectiveness within him that he could not suppress. The night deepened, shadows crawling across the marble floors as he moved through the mansion. Each step was deliberate, every corner scanned for threats. He could feel the energy of his own empire around him, loyal men watching, waiting for instructions. Yet none could protect the boy or Nia with the personal intensity that he could muster. They belonged to him now, in ways that went beyond business or power. Suddenly, a sound from the hallway, a soft, deliberate shift, made him freeze. Nia stepped from the shadows, wet from the rain, hair clinging to her face, but her eyes bright with defiance. She had returned from an inspection of the perimeter, ensuring that no threat had slipped through, moving with the quiet, with a confidence that had both impressed and infuriated him. He closed the distance between them with a predator's grace, and for the first time in moments of calm, the tension between them ignited. Their eyes met, and the world outside the mansion seemed to vanish. The rain, the threats, the empire, all faded into the background as he drew her close. Impulsively, violently, driven by an unspoken need and fear, he pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was fierce, urgent, a mixture of desire, frustration, and protectiveness. She froze for a heartbeat, then melted slightly into the intensity, their emotions colliding like storms. The moment was broken by the sound of movement outside, a warning that danger had not vanished, only shifted. Adrian's jaw tightened, and he released her reluctantly, stepping back to regain control. The dark romance that had begun was undeniable, yet it existed alongside violence, strategy, and the constant threat of enemies who would not rest. He barely had time to process when the traitorous lieutenant appeared, one of his own men who had dared to plot behind his back. The man's eyes were defiant, calculating, and arrogant. "You've grown soft, Moretti," he spat, blade in hand, ready to test his master's limits. "The boy, the maid, you, everything is slipping from your control." Adrian's eyes narrowed, dark and dangerous. His empire had been built on obedience, fear, and precision. No man dared challenge him, and yet here stood one who thought he could test the boundaries. The fight was immediate, violent, and relentless. Adrian moved with the lethal grace of a man born into brutality, disarming, striking, and bending the traitor's momentum against him. Blood, sweat, and the metallic scent of the struggle filled the room. Naya, watching from the doorway, felt a mixture of fear and awe. She had survived so many threats, yet witnessing Adrian's sheer power in motion was unlike anything she had imagined. Every strike, every motion revealed the depth of the darkness within him, the ruthless force that protected everything he loved, and Destro, eat everything that dared oppose him. The lieutenant fell, incapacitated, and Adrian's eyes swept the room, finally resting on Naya. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice low and dangerous, yet laced with a possessive edge that left her heart racing. She obeyed instinctively, understanding that his protection was as vital as her own cunning. As the night dragged on, the mansion settled into a tense quiet. The fight had been brutal, the lesson clear. Adrian's darkness was not just a tool of fear, it was a shield, a weapon, and a warning to anyone who might dare harm what belonged to him. Nia felt the pull of him, the undeniable magnetism of a man who was both terrifying and protective, and she could not ignore the stirrings within her. Yet the darkness of the world outside intruded once more. A shadow moved silently at the edge of the estate. Adrian sensed it immediately, moving with swift precision, only to discover a trace that chilled him to the bone, evidence that Nia had been taken. The blackmailer's henchman had struck, exploiting a momentary vulnerability, and now she was gone. Adrian's hand tightened around the railing of the stairs, his knuckles white with rage. Every muscle in his body tensed, a storm of fury and fear brewing within him. He had trained for battles, wars, betrayals, yet the thought of her in the hands of those who would harm her ignited a darkness more primal than any he had ever known. The mansion, usually a fortress, seemed suddenly fragile under the weight of his realization. He moved swiftly, issuing orders to his men with a precision that brooked no argument. Every ally, every loyal soldier was mobilized instantly. No one would fail him. No one would allow her to be taken without consequence. As he raced through the rain-slicked streets, his mind was a whirlwind of strategies and contingencies. He would find her. He would extract her from danger, no matter the cost. And he would make the blackmailer pay in ways that were swift, brutal, and unforgettable. But even as his fury surged, the tension between them lingered in his mind, the memory of the stolen kiss, the way she had met his gaze, the defiance and courage that defined her. The darkness within him, usually unshakable, now wrestled with a new force, desire, fascination, and a possessive need that he could neither ignore nor fully understand. The chase began in earnest. Shadows moved in the night, threats closing in from every side, but Adrian's resolve was absolute. He would not fail. He could not. Nia's life, her skill, her courage, everything he had come to respect, protect, and secretly crave, hung in the balance. Meanwhile, Nia, captured and restrained, assessed her surroundings with keen intelligence. She had survived countless dangers before, and she would not succumb now. Every plan, every clever tactic she had employed was racing through her mind as she searched for an opening, a chance to escape, a way to survive the blackmailer's trap. The tension between captor and captive was electric. Her resolve clashed with their determination, her intelligence countering brute force. But deep inside, she also felt a pang of longing, a thought of Adrian and the protective darkness he represented. She had glimpsed his humanity, his rare softness behind the ruthless exterior, and she knew that he would come for her, no matter the obstacles. Outside, Adrian closed the distance, tracking them with relentless precision. His mind raced with possibilities, contingencies, and plans of attack. He had faced enemies before, but this threat was personal, intimate, and intolerable. Nia's capture was a challenge he would not allow to succeed. The night stretched on, rain-soaked streets echoing with the promise of confrontation. Both hunter and hunted were locked in a deadly dance, each step, each breath, each heartbeat charged with peril. The dark romance, the thrill of danger, and the raw force of Adrian's protective nature collided in a storm that promised blood, passion, and consequences that neither could ignore. And just as the blackmailer's henchmen believed they had gained the upper hand, the sound of a car engine roared nearby. Adrian had arrived. The final confrontation was imminent. Nia's fate, their connection, and the deadly game they had become entwined in would all come to a head in the storm about to break. The chapter closed on the edge of violence, desire, and desperation. Adrian's darkness burned brighter than ever, fueled by fear, rage, and a possessive need to reclaim what was his. Nia's courage and skill were undeniable, but she now faced the harsh reality of captivity. The blackmailer had her, and Adrian's next move would determine whether she survived or was lost forever. Adrian moved through the night like a phantom, the shadows his allies as he tracked the blackmailer's henchmen. Every step was precise, silent, yet heavy with purpose. Rain-slicked streets reflected the dim streetlights, giving the city an eerie, distorted glow. His mind raced with strategies, contingencies, and the singular, unrelenting focus on finding Nia. She was not just a person to protect. She was the force that had stirred something raw and undeniable within him, a pull he could neither resist nor articulate. The abandoned warehouse loomed ahead, its darkened windows like watchful eyes. Adrian's breath was steady, controlled, yet his pulse thrummed with the anticipation of confrontation. He had fought wars, faced enemies who had sought to dismantle him piece by piece, but the stakes tonight were different. This was personal, intimate, and every instinct screamed that failure was not an option. Inside, Nia crouched behind a stack of crates, her senses heightened, every nerve alert. She had managed to evade capture for now, using clever misdirection, a small piece of broken glass, and shadows to her advantage. But she knew it was only a matter of time before reinforcements arrived, or the blackmailer realized she had not yet succumbed to their trap. Her mind raced, calculating, predicting, planning. Survival was an art, and she had mastered it early in life. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the far wall. She froze, recognizing the unmistakable presence of Adrian. Relief and tension collided in her chest as she stepped out of hiding, her movements deliberate, calculated, aware of every breath, every gesture. He nodded almost imperceptibly, and together they prepared to strike. The first wave of attackers entered, unaware of the storm about to descend upon them. Adrian moved like a predator, lethal, precise, leaving no margin for error. Every strike, every motion demonstrated his mastery of violence, honed over years of ruthless leadership. Nia was not idle. She moved with ingenuity, disarming and incapacitating enemies with tools at hand, using the environment to her advantage, proving that her skill extended beyond healing. The clash was chaotic, a blur of movement, metal, and shadow. Nia ducked under a swing, grabbed a chain hanging from the rafters, and swung it at an approaching henchman, sending him sprawling. Adrian intercepted another, disarming him with brutal efficiency before sending him crashing into a stack of crates. The warehouse echoed with grunts, the metallic clash of weapons, and the sharp exhale of pain. Despite the danger, the moments between them were electric. Hands brushed while they moved in tandem, eyes met across the chaos, and in fleeting seconds, a silent communication passed. Trust, reliance, and something far deeper than words could capture. The dark romance that had begun in fleeting glances now pulsed in the intensity of shared survival. Nia's cleverness turned the tide at every corner. She lured one man into a trap, sending a falling beam crashing down to block his escape. Another attacker underestimated her agility and was thrown off balance as she used his own momentum against him. Adrian watched, impressed and deeply aware of the bond forming between them, a connection forged in fire, danger, and mutual respect. The fight intensified. Rain seeped through broken windows, slicking the floor and adding unpredictability to every movement. Adrian's focus sharpened. Nia's cunning grew. Together, they became an unstoppable force, a predator and prey in reverse, hunting those who had sought to harm them. Their synchronization was almost instinctive, a dance of violence and survival that neither had experienced before. Then, a sharp pain tore through Adrian's side, a knife, unseen until it struck, and he stumbled, almost losing his balance. The world seemed to tilt for a heartbeat. Nia's eyes widened, fear mingling with urgency. He had always been her protector, the shadow that ensured her survival. Now he was the one in need. Without hesitation, Nia moved to him, her hands, trembling but determined, pressed against the wound. She whispered softly, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Her mysterious gift surged, a warmth and energy she could barely explain, flowing through her fingers, seeking the broken, wounded part of him. Adrian gritted his teeth, resisting the shock of vulnerability, yet he could feel the healing pulse, the unmistakable power that had first saved his son. The attackers, momentarily stunned by the shift in the room, faltered. Nia's hands glowed faintly, an invisible aura of energy that seemed to defy understanding, mending what was broken, stabilizing what was faltering. Adrian's breath slowed, his strength returning as the knife wound closed under her skillful touch. The sight left some of the henchmen frozen, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Adrian's gaze, dark and intense, met hers. No words were necessary. He knew finally the depths of her gift, the power she wielded, and the courage that had always driven her. She was not just a survivor, she was extraordinary. And now she had saved him, reversed the roles, and strengthened the bond between them in ways neither could deny. The fight resumed, but their synergy had grown, a seamless combination of brute force and cunning. Every attacker that moved into the fray met precise retaliation, some disarmed, others incapacitated, all under the combined skill of the Mafia boss and the miraculous Maid. The warehouse became a crucible, forging a partnership of survival, trust, and unspoken desire. Amid the chaos, brief moments of connection flared. Adrian brushing rain-soaked hair from Nia's face as they ducked behind crates, her hand lingering near his as they maneuvered through danger, the tension of attraction mingling with the immediacy of life and death. Their bond deepened with every shared glance, every instinctive movement, and every silent acknowledgement that they relied on each other completely. The last of the henchmen fell, retreating into the night, leaving the warehouse in tense, dripping silence. Nia's chest heaved from exertion, her eyes still bright with adrenaline and determination. Adrian stepped close, his own breathing heavy but controlled, his dark gaze fixed on her. "You are extraordinary," he murmured, voice low, rough with emotion. Nia's lips pressed into a tight line, but her eyes held the spark of defiance and courage that had defined her throughout the ordeal. "We survive because we fight together," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart raced. The dark connection between them pulsed, undeniable, yet tempered by the knowledge that danger was far from over. Adrian nodded, reluctant to admit the intensity of his feelings, yet fully aware that their bond had been irrevocably strengthened. "And yet, I should have protected you," he said, voice low, dangerous, haunted. She shook her head slightly, understanding the weight of the unspoken admission. The night, rain-soaked and tense, held a quiet promise of more trials to come. Their partnership had solidified in blood and shadows, But the world outside was relentless. The blackmail, ours still at large, and the stakes rising higher with every heartbeat. Then, as they caught their breath and prepared to move, a sudden noise echoed through the far corner of the warehouse. Nia froze, recognizing the unmistakable sign of reinforcements. Someone else had entered, drawn by the battle's chaos. Adrian's jaw tightened, and instinctively he stepped in front of her, protective and lethal. And in that moment, the unthinkable happened. A sharp, concealed blade struck Adrian from behind, sending him crashing against a stack of crates. His strength faltered, and the world seemed to tilt. Naya's heart lurched. He, the unstoppable force, was wounded. She rushed forward instinctively, her hands pressed to his injuries once more, channeling her mysterious, extraordinary gift. The energy surged through her, steadying him, mending what was broken. But the cost of her exertion weighed heavily on her, leaving her drained even as the danger continued to loom. Outside, the blackmailer's shadowy influence had not yet been broken. Nia understood, with a chilling certainty, that the threats were far from over. Adrian, now weakened but alive, relied on her once more. The bond between them, forged in darkness and danger, had become absolute. But their struggle had only begun. The night closed with the tension thick, the dark romance undeniable, and the cliffhanger clear. Nia's power had saved him, but the blackmailer still lurked, ready to strike, and Adrian's vulnerability left them both at risk. Survival, trust, and desire hung in a delicate balance, poised for the storms yet to come. The rain had not stopped, pounding relentlessly against the broken windows of the warehouse. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the smell of damp concrete mixing with the sharp metallic tang of blood. Naya knelt beside Adrian, her hands trembling slightly but steady in their purpose. The knife wound along his side had reopened during the last skirmish, and despite her exhaustion, she focused, channeling her gift into him, feeling the energy pulse from her fingertips into his broken body. Adrian's breaths were ragged, each one a reminder of the fragility he had always concealed beneath layers of strength and ruthlessness. The violence he had endured all his life had never prepared him for this. The vulnerability of depending on someone else, of allowing another human being to mend him. And yet, with Nia's touch, he felt something he could neither name nor resist: trust, connection, and a flicker of surrender. Nia's eyes were fierce, determined, and soft all at once. She had fought so many battles, survived so many threats, yet the moment she was alone with him in the stormy night, the world reduced to rain, shadows, and their shared struggle, she allowed herself a fraction of vulnerability. Her heart pounded, her pulse quickened, but her hands never wavered. She whispered over him, soft, urgent, the words almost drowned by the storm outside. "Stay with me. Stay alive." Adrian's dark eyes fluttered open, meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. You shouldn't risk yourself for me," he rasped, pain lacing his voice, yet the possessive edge beneath it was unmistakable. "You're not just anyone. You're—" He trailed off, uncharacteristically lost for words. "I'm not anyone," Naya replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "And I'm not afraid of dying, not if it means keeping you alive." Her hands glowed faintly, the energy of her gift radiating around them, illuminating the dark warehouse in a soft, ethereal light. The rain outside streaked through the broken windows, mixing with the warm glow of her power, creating an almost surreal, intimate cocoon around them. Adrian struggled to sit up, his hand reaching to cover hers. I don't do this," he admitted, voice low, rough, and vulnerable. "Feelings, softness, attachment, they're weaknesses in my world, but with you—" His voice faltered, emotions threatening to break the iron facade he wore so effortlessly. Nia's lips curved into a faint, understanding smile. "Maybe this world isn't ours to change," she said softly, But maybe we can carve out a space where we belong, together, if we're brave enough. Her words hung in the air, charged with hope, desire, and the weight of truth. The intensity between them escalated. Adrian leaned closer, his dark presence enveloping her, a mixture of danger, authority, and desire. The storm outside mirrored the storm within, each flash of lightning illuminating the heat, the tension, and the undeniable pull between them. His lips found hers again, slower this time, deeper, exploring, seeking reassurance, passion, and connection. Nia responded with equal fervor, wrapping her arms around him, holding him as tightly as he held her. Minutes stretched into an eternity, the storm outside a backdrop to their dark, consuming intimacy. Every heartbeat, every touch, every whispered word deepened the bond that had grown amidst danger, blood, and shadows. Adrian's protective instincts mingled with his emerging vulnerability, creating a tension that was both thrilling and terrifying. But the world beyond the warehouse was relentless. Their enemies had sensed weakness in the disruption of Adrian's usual iron control. Rival Mafia factions had picked up whispers of Nia's miraculous abilities, the failed attacks, and the chaos of the last confrontation. They moved quickly, sensing an opportunity to exploit the moment of intimacy and distraction. Adrian broke the kiss reluctantly, his forehead resting against hers, breathing heavy. "Stay close," he murmured, voice rough, protective. "I will not lose you. Not to them, not to anyone." His gaze swept the shadows, calculating, analyzing, always the Mafia boss first, lover second, protector foremost. Nia nodded, her hands still glowing faintly from the effort of saving him, but her eyes locked on his. "And I won't leave," she whispered. "Not now, not ever. We fight, we survive, together." The intensity of her declaration left no room for doubt. They were bound, not just by circumstance, but by choice, courage, and the fire that now burned between them. The quiet between them was shattered by the sudden ring of Adrian's secure phone. He snatched it from the nearby table, his dark gaze sharpening instantly. "Speak," he demanded as he answered, voice a dangerous, low growl. The voice on the other end was cold, calculated, and cruel. "Your son and the maid will be ours tomorrow," it hissed. The words carried an unspoken threat of violence, leverage, and chaos. Adrian's jaw tightened, knuckles white as he gripped the phone, the storm outside now echoing the storm within him. Nia felt the weight of the words, her heart tightening. The fragile moment of peace had been shattered, replaced by the pressing reality of relentless enemies. She could feel the tension radiating off Adrian, his fury barely restrained, his protective instincts in overdrive. The warehouse seemed to shrink around them, shadows creeping closer, echoing the presence of the threat. Every sense was heightened, the sound of distant rain, the faint rustle of wind, the faint metallic tang of fear lingering in the air. Their dark romance, intense and consuming, was now tempered by the urgency of survival. Adrian moved to her side, his hand gripping hers tightly, their fingers intertwined. "We face this, together," he vowed, voice low, dark, and filled with promise. The intimacy of the gesture, the unspoken depth of their connection, added weight to the threat looming over them. Nia's gaze met his, her eyes steady despite the fear twisting in her stomach. "We've survived worse," she replied, though she knew this challenge might be the most dangerous yet. "We'll survive again, if we trust each other completely." The storm outside intensified, lightning illuminating the warehouse in sharp, fleeting bursts, the sound of thunder reverberating like a drum of impending battle. Adrian's dark presence seemed to merge with the shadows, a protective force poised to strike at anyone who dared harm what was his. They spent the rest of the night planning, strategizing, and preparing. Every move was calculated, every step deliberate. Nia's gift would be vital, Adrian's ruthlessness indispensable. Their bond had strengthened in the crucible of danger, desire, and shared vulnerability. Yet as the first light of dawn began to filter through the broken windows, the threat remained, unresolved and immediate. The blackmailer had set a deadline, a cruel ultimatum, and the stakes were higher than ever. Adrian's dark gaze swept over Naya, lingering on her, aware of the growing connection, the romance born of chaos, and the dangerous path ahead. The chapter closed on a cliffhanger of raw intensity. The storm outside mirrored the storm within, enemies closing in, the boy's life and Nia's safety hanging in the balance. Adrian's darkness and Nia's gift, together, were their only hope against the relentless tide of threats, and tomorrow would test everything: loyalty, courage, love, and survival itself. The city was a storm of chaos as Adrian mobilized every ounce of his power, his empire moving like a living, breathing force under his command. Sirens wailed in the distance, though they were powerless against his reach. Every alley, every rooftop, every shadow was a potential battlefield. He had called in his most loyal men, his best fighters, yet even they knew the stakes had never been higher. The blackmailer had escalated their game, turning the city into a labyrinth of danger, death, and betrayal. Nia moved beside him, agile, alert, and alive with purpose. Her gift had already saved lives tonight, her hands a conduit of healing energy that strengthened the wounded, stilled the dying, and fueled the endurance of their allies. Her show Recence was a beacon, a light cutting through the darkness, yet even she felt the tension pressing in from every direction. The city itself seemed to conspire against them, its rain-slick streets echoing with the footfalls of enemies and the distant boom of gunfire. The first wave struck hard. Rival factions, mercenaries, and traitors who had once called Adrian master moved with lethal intent. Bullets and blades tore through the night, smoke and sparks filling the narrow streets. Adrian's movements were fluid, precise, and brutal. Every strike measured, every motion calculated. He was a force of nature, a storm incarnate, and yet his mind remained focused on Nia and the boy. Nothing else mattered. Nia dodged and weaved, her instincts honed to perfection. She guided the injured through the chaos, whispered instructions to allies, and struck with cunning when necessary. Her hands glowed faintly at times, her energy radiating outward, stitching wounds and stabilizing those on the brink of collapse. She was fearless, brilliant, and utterly indispensable. Amid the chaos, betrayals surfaced. One of Adrian's lieutenants, previously trusted, turned on him, attempting to seize control of a key position. Adrian's eyes darkened with fury, his movements becoming a deadly dance of violence. He disarmed the traitor, his hands precise, his blows swift and merciless. Every betrayal was a reminder that the world he commanded demanded ruthless efficiency and unwavering loyalty. Explosions rocked the streets, sending shards of concrete and fire into the night air. Nia shielded the wounded, her energy a protective barrier, her determination unwavering. Adrian's gaze never left her, a mixture of admiration, possessiveness, and raw desire flashing beneath his dark exterior. He had fought countless battles, but none had stirred him like this. The combination of danger, love, and shared purpose, creating a tension that crackled in every glance, every touch, every heartbeat. A sniper's bullet shattered a nearby wall, sending debris raining down. Adrian moved in a blur, deflect. Ting danger, taking out threats with brutal precision. Nia's mind worked quickly, predicting movements, countering attacks, and keeping the injured alive long enough to regroup. Together, they were unstoppable, a combination of lethal force and miraculous skill. Even as they fought, the city seemed to mourn around them. Fires burned unchecked, innocents fled, and the body count rose. Allies fell beside them, their sacrifices a stark reminder of the stakes. Adrian's heart hardened with each loss, yet softened in fleeting moments when he caught Nia's glance, saw her determination, and felt the unspoken bond that had grown amidst blood and fire. As they advanced through the maze of danger, the blackmailer's forces grew desperate, revealing their ultimate plan. The boy had been taken once more. Adrian's chest tightened, rage and fear colliding into a storm that threatened to consume him. Nia caught his hand, her touch grounding him, her eyes reflecting the same resolve he felt. They would not fail. Not now. Not ever. The streets became a crucible of fire, blood, and betrayal. Explosions ripped apart buildings, gunfire cracked like thunder, and shadows moved with lethal intent. Adrian's men fought with unparalleled ferocity, inspired by his presence. But it was Nia's ingenuity and healing that kept them alive. She was not merely a healer, she was a strategist, a guide, a force of nature in her own right. Adrian's focus narrowed, each step measured, each breath controlled. He moved through enemies with lethal grace, a predator hunting what was his. Every strike was fueled by love, fury, and an unbreakable determination to reclaim what had been stolen. Nia stayed close, her hands glowing faintly, ready to heal, protect, and fight beside him. The battle reached its zenith when they cornered a contingent of blackmailer's henchmen, the boy nowhere in sight. Adrian's rage, says, Lord, his dark presence overwhelming, every movement a promise of lethal retribution. Nia's heart pounded, not just with fear, but with the intensity of their connection, the shared risk, and the unspoken longing that had grown amidst chaos. The henchmen fought with desperation, but Adrian's control was absolute. Each attack was countered, each threat neutralized, and yet the boy remained absent. Nia's mind raced, calculating possibilities, potential traps, and escape routes. She whispered to Adrian, guiding him, keeping him focused, even as her own pulse raced with fear and anticipation. They moved as one, predator and partner, through the ruined streets and burning buildings. Shadows twisted around them, yet nothing could deter their relentless pursuit. Every corner, every alley, every shattered doorway became a battlefield, each step bringing them closer to their goal. Then, a shadow moved from above, a trap. Explosions rocked the street, sending debris flying. Nia pulled Adrian down just in time, the blast missing them but leaving destruction in its wake. The boy's laughter, distant and faint, carried on the wind, a cruel reminder of what was at stake and what they had yet to reclaim. Adrian's eyes blazed, dark and dangerous, as he scanned the horizon. He's here, he growled, voice low and lethal, and I will get him back. Nia's hand found his, steady, glowing faintly, her power ready to protect him if needed. Their bond, forged in fire, blood, and survival, now carried the weight of urgency, love, and unspoken promises. The blackmailer's forces regrouped, desperate, cornered, yet cunning. They had anticipated Adrian's wrath, yet underestimated the depth of his fury and the brilliance of Nia's abilities. Every move was calculated, every strike deliberate, yet the boy remained just out of reach. Adrian's men fell in precise coordination, Nia guiding them with both instinct and skill. The air was thick with smoke, the scent of gunpowder, blood, and rain mixing into a heady cocktail of chaos. Every step brought them closer, yet the tension mounted. The boats. I was still in danger, the enemy clever, and the night far from over. Finally, they reached a fortified building, the likely location of the boy. The blackmailer's henchmen were alert, traps set, ready for confrontation. Adrian's gaze darkened, calculating, assessing. He and Nia shared a brief, intense look, trust, determination, and unspoken emotion flashing between them. Together they would strike. Together they would survive. Together they would reclaim what had been taken. But the moment was interrupted. From the shadows, a figure emerged holding the boy in his arms, taunting, a cruel smile twisting his face. Adrian's chest tightened, his darkness and desire merging into a lethal promise. Nia's hands glowed faintly, ready to heal, to strike, to protect. The chapter closed on a cliffhanger. Adrian and Nia cornered, the boy in the enemy's grasp. The city a storm of fire and danger, and the final battle about to erupt. Every heartbeat, every breath, every flicker of shadow and light held the tension of life, love, and survival teetering on the edge. Adrian's dark eyes narrowed as he stepped forward, every muscle coiled with lethal intent. The boy's small form trembled in the blackmailer's grip, but Adrian's focus was absolute. There would be no hesitation, no mercy for those who dared touch what was his. Nia moved beside him, her hands glowing faintly, a pulse of energy that steadied the boy and prepared her to act at a moment's notice. The air was thick with tension, the city outside silent in anticipation, as though even the night itself held its breath. The blackmailer sneered, arrogance in every movement. "You've come far, Moretti," he said, voice dripping with venom. "But tonight, you lose everything." His henchmen flanked him, weapons drawn, ready to strike at any sign of weakness. Adrian's lips pressed into a thin line, a low growl escaping as he calculated. His approach. There was no room for error, no second chances. Every step forward was measured, deliberate, deadly. Nia's gaze flicked to Adrian, then to the boy. Her heart ached at the sight of the child trembling, yet her resolve was unwavering. She had faced death countless times before, but the stakes had never been higher. Her hands glowed brighter, energy ready to heal, to protect, to give them the edge they desperately needed. The connection between her and Adrian crackled with intensity, fear, desire, and trust, mingling into a bond stronger than any force in the world. The blackmailer laughed, signaling his men. Bullets tore through the air, sparks flying as Adrian moved like a shadow, disarming, incapacitating, striking with precision. Nia ducked behind crates, her energy flaring, shielding the boy from stray fire. The warehouse became a storm of violence, chaos, and determination, each second an eternity. Adrian's fury was palpable. Each strike was more than combat. It was a declaration, a promise to protect what belonged to him. He moved with lethal grace, a predator dancing among prey, his eyes never leaving the blackmailer. Nia followed, a ghost of light in his darkness, healing, striking, guiding. The synergy between them was seamless, unstoppable. Suddenly, one of the henchmen lunged at Nia, knife raised. She reacted instinctively, dodging, and sending him crashing into a pile of crates. Adrian intercepted another, throwing him aside with brutal force, his rage and love intertwined, giving him strength beyond any normal human limit. Every movement was calculated, precise, deadly. The blackmailer tried to retreat with the boy, but Adrian anticipated every step. With a swift, powerful motion, he tackled the man to the ground, the fight collapsing into raw, close-quarters violence. The blackmailer's arrogance faltered as he realized he had underestimated the combination of Adrian's ruthlessness and Nia's miraculous skill. Nia knelt beside the boy, whispering words of comfort, her hands glowing as she stabilized him, ensuring he was unharmed. The Seishal, Hild's eyes, wide with fear moments ago, now filled with trust and awe as he looked at the two figures who had saved him from unimaginable danger. Her energy flowed through him, steadying, protecting, a silent promise of safety. Adrian pinned the blackmailer beneath his weight, voice low, lethal. "This ends tonight," he growled, darkness and desire blending in a way that made the threat undeniable. The blackmailer struggled, but Adrian's grip was absolute, unyielding, unstoppable. Every betrayal, every threat, every attempt to harm what was his ended here. Nia stood behind Adrian, hands ready, energy flaring, a silent shield for both of them. The connection between her and Adrian was undeniable, their trust forged in fire and blood, and now solidified in the final battle. She whispered softly, "I'm with you, always," and the words carried weight heavier than any weapon. The blackmailer made one last desperate lunge, but Adrian countered with lethal precision. The fight ended in a heartbeat, the man incapacitated, stripped of power, and rendered helpless. Adrian's chest heaved, eyes dark with fury and relief. The boy was safe, Nia was unharmed, and the threat had been neutralized. The storm outside began to abate, rain slowing to a gentle drizzle. The chaos of battle faded, leaving a quiet that was almost surreal. Adrian released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his gaze sweeping over Nia and the boy. Relief, admiration, and an unspoken desire shimmered in his eyes. Nia approached him, her hands brushing against his, her energy still faintly glowing. "He's safe," she said softly, voice trembling with emotion, exhaustion, and lingering adrenaline. "We did it." Adrian's dark eyes softened, a rare moment of vulnerability showing through. He drew her close, fingers brushing hair from her face, lips capturing hers in a slow, searing kiss that spoke of relief, passion, and promises unspoken. The dark romance that had grown amidst violence and fear now flourished, intense and undeniable, a bond forged in survival and trust. The boy clung to Nia, looking up at Adrian with awe and trust, as if sensing the protective darkness that surrounded them. Adrian knelt beside him, his hand resting lightly on the child's shoulder, a silent vow of protection and love. The moment was intimate, tender, and yet heavy with the gravity of what they had survived. All around, the remnants of the battle lay scattered, crates overturned, broken glass, scorched walls. But none of it mattered. They had triumphed. Their enemies were defeated, the blackmailer powerless, and the boy safe. Adrian's empire had survived, strengthened by loyalty, strategy, and the miraculous intervention of Nia. He looked at Nia again, dark and intense. "You've changed everything," he said quietly, voice rough with emotion. "Not just for me, for him, for all of this." Nia smiled faintly, brushing a hand against his cheek, feeling the warmth beneath the darkness. "And you've shown me, even in darkness, there can be light," she whispered. The storm outside had cleared entirely, the city bathed in the muted glow of dawn. For the first time in a long time, Adrian allowed himself to breathe, to let go, just slightly, of the unyielding control that had defined his life. Nia's hand in his was a reminder that some things, love, trust, survival, were worth everything. He pulled her close, arms wrapping around her with possessive tenderness, the weight of his emotions unfiltered. "Stay with me," he demanded softly, a command that carried no threat, only need, only desire. Nia's lips curved into a small, confident smile. "Always," she replied, pressing herself into him, their connection sealed through fire, blood, and unbreakable trust. The boy nestled between them, a symbol of what they had fought for, the tangible proof of survival, love, and the extraordinary power that Nia wielded. Adrian's dark gaze softened, lingering on her, then on the child, a rare flicker of vulnerability breaking through his otherwise unyielding exterior. The final threats had been neutralized, the enemies defeated, and yet the bond between Adrian and Nia was stronger than any force outside their walls. The dark romance, forged in shadow and danger, had blossomed fully, leaving them intertwined in trust, passion, and mutual respect. As the sun rose, the city seemed to breathe again. The night of chaos, fear, and battle had ended, leaving a world that was battered but intact. Adrian, Nia, and the boy stood together, a family forged in extraordinary circumstances, their lives forever changed, yet stronger for it. The chapter closed with a sense of completion and promise. The darkness had been conquered, the love between Adrian and Nia undeniable, and the future, though uncertain, was theirs to face together, as a unit, as a family, as survivors of a world that had tried to break them but had failed.